The Milky Way is over 13 billion years old. There are more planets in our galaxy than grains of sand on every beach on Earth. Billions of worlds orbit billions of suns. Some of those worlds are older than our entire solar system by thousands of millions of years. Civilizations could have risen and fallen 1,000,000 times over. They could have spread across the stars. They could have built empires spanning entire spiral arms. And yet, when we turn our telescopes toward the heavens, we hear nothing. For decades, humanity has listened. Radio dishes in deserts and on mountaintops have scanned the sky. They search for a whisper, a signal, any sign that someone else is out there. The universe remains completely silent. What if that silence is not emptiness? What if it is fear? What if every civilization that survives long enough learns the same terrible lesson? To speak is to reveal your location. To reveal your location is to die. The cosmos may be full of life, billions of minds on billions of worlds, all of them hiding, all of them holding their breath in the dark, and Earth has been broadcasting its existence for over a century. Our radio signals have already traveled nearly 200 light years into space. Every transmission, every radar pulse, every television broadcast, all of it rushing outward at the speed of light. A beacon we cannot recall, a confession we cannot take back. If something is listening, it already knows where we are. If you enjoy what comes next, hit that like button and subscribe. We begin now. The question arrived over lunch. It was 1950, Los Alamos, New Mexico. A group of physicists sat around a table, talking about the usual things brilliant people talk about when they have free time. Flying saucers, recent news reports of strange objects in the sky. The conversation drifted toward probability, toward the vastness of space, toward the likelihood that we are not alone. Then Enrico Fermi looked up from his meal and asked a simple question. Where is everybody? The table went quiet. Not because the question was complicated, because no one had an answer, and decades later, nobody still does. Fermi was not some dreamer wondering about little green men. He was one of the most rigorous minds of his generation. He built the first nuclear reactor. He helped create the atomic bomb. When Fermi asked a question, it was because the math did not make sense. And the math on this particular question made no sense at all. The Milky Way has existed for over 13 billion years. That number is so large, it stops meaning anything. So consider it differently. If you compressed those 13 billion years into a single calendar year, with the galaxy forming on January 1st, our entire solar system would not exist until September. Earth would not cool enough for liquid water until late September. The first single-celled life would appear in October, and all of human history, every empire, every war, every love story, every person who ever lived, would fit into the final second before midnight on December 31st. That is how young we are. That is how much time the universe had before us. A civilization could have emerged billions of years ago. They could have developed technology while our planet was still a molten ball of rock. Given just a few million years of expansion, which is nothing on these timescales, a single species could have spread across the entire galaxy. They could have visited every star, planted colonies on every habitable world, left artifacts, structures, signals. The math says they should be everywhere. The evidence says they are nowhere. Picture a city at night. Thousands of apartment buildings, millions of windows. You stand on the street and look up. Every single window is dark. No lights, no movement, no sound. Just you, alone, in a building with the only light on. That is what we observe when we look at the cosmos. Our solar system is that single lit window. The galaxy stretches around us, vast and old and full of opportunity. And every other window has gone dark. This makes no statistical sense. Early astronomers expected something different. In the decades after Fermi asked his question, scientists turned their instruments toward the sky with optimism. They built enormous dishes to catch whispers from distant worlds. They developed equations to estimate how many civilizations should exist. Some calculations suggested thousands, others suggested millions. The most conservative estimates still predicted dozens of detectable civilizations in our cosmic neighborhood. They found nothing. The universe should be noisy. It should be buzzing with transmissions and probes and evidence of intelligence. Mathematically, it should be impossible for us to be the only ones. And yet, here we are, listening, waiting, hearing only silence. We don't really know why the silence exists. That's the honest answer. But the possibilities range from lonely to terrifying. Maybe we are the first. Perhaps in all this vast expanse, across 13 billion years of cosmic history, we are the universe's first attempt at intelligence, the first eyes to open, the first minds to wonder. This would make us rare beyond measure. It would also make us profoundly alone. Maybe we are the last. Perhaps civilizations rose and fell countless times before us. Perhaps the galaxy was once alive with voices, and then something silenced them, something that burned through world after world, leaving only quiet behind. Or maybe they are all still there, watching, waiting, refusing to make a sound. The Fermi Paradox is not just a scientific puzzle, it is a philosophical mirror reflecting our own fears back at us. When we stare into that silence, we see ourselves, our hopes of companionship, our terror of being alone, our deeper terror of not being alone. The question Fermi asked over lunch was innocent enough, a physicist noticing that the numbers did not add up. But that simple question has haunted us ever since. It sits at the center of every search for extraterrestrial life, every radio telescope pointed at the stars, every probe sent into the void. Where is everybody? The silence offers no answer. What silences a galaxy? What force or law or terrible truth could explain an emptiness this complete? The numbers insist that life should be common. The evidence insists that it is not. One of these things must be wrong. Perhaps life is harder to create than we imagine. Perhaps intelligence is a fluke. Perhaps technology carries within it the seeds of destruction, and every civilization that masters the atom or the gene eventually masters its own extinction. There is a theory that suggests something lies ahead, a barrier so lethal that almost nothing passes through, a filter that catches species just as they begin to reach for the stars and destroys them. If this filter exists, it would explain everything: the silence, the darkness, the empty windows stretching in every direction. We may be approaching that filter now, or we may have already passed it without knowing. Either possibility reshapes everything we think about our future. The paradox named after that physicist at lunch remains unsolved, but the shape of the mystery has grown clearer over time. Something is wrong. Either our assumptions about life are catastrophically mistaken, or something out there is stopping it from spreading. The truth waits somewhere in that darkness, and whatever that truth turns out to be, it will change everything. Something is wrong. The math insists that life should have flourished across this galaxy long before our sun ever ignited. Yet we find nothing. We hear nothing. The cosmos stretches in every direction, ancient and vast, and it offers us only quiet. There is a theory that might explain this. It carries a name that sounds almost clinical, the Great Filter, but the idea behind it is anything but sterile. It suggests that somewhere in the long journey from dead chemistry to starfaring civilization, there exists a wall, a barrier so devastating that almost nothing passes through. Picture the history of existence as a river. It has been flowing for nearly 14 billion years. That span of time is almost impossible to hold in your mind. If you tried to count each year out loud, one number per second, you would die of old age long before you finished. The river has been running for that long, and all along its length, in countless eddies and pools, conditions have been right for life to spark into being. Some of those sparks must have caught. Some of those pools must have grown warm with biology, thick with organisms. bright with the light of new minds opening to the universe. The river has had time for this to happen over and over again. Yet when we look upstream and downstream, when we search the waters for any sign of others who made the journey, we find the currents empty. Most branches ended abruptly. Somewhere along the stream of evolution, something stopped them. The river flowed on, indifferent, but the life within it vanished before its voices ever reached the stars. This is the great filter at work. It functions like a cosmic checkpoint, a place where civilizations arrive, face some test, and almost universally fail. They do not fail loudly. They do not fail in ways we can detect. They simply cease to exist, and the silence they leave behind is indistinguishable from a universe where they never arose at all. The troubling part is that we do not know where this checkpoint sits along the river. It might already be behind us. Perhaps the truly impossible step was the very first one, the leap from non-living chemistry to the first self-replicating molecule. We treat the origin of life as though it were inevitable, given enough time and the right conditions. But we have only one example, Earth, and a sample size of one tells us almost nothing. For all we know, that initial spark required a coincidence so staggeringly unlikely that it happens only once in a trillion worlds. If that is true, then we are the lottery winners. The universe dealt an impossible hand, and somehow we drew it. Every other world sits barren, waiting for a miracle that will never come. Or perhaps the filter came later. The jump from simple single-celled organisms to complex multicellular life took nearly 3 billion years on Earth, 3 billion years of patience. For most of our planet's biological history, nothing more complicated than bacteria existed. If this transition is the bottleneck, then countless worlds might be covered in microbial slime, teeming with life in the loosest sense, but forever locked out of complexity. Either of these scenarios would be cause for celebration. If the filter is behind us, it means we have already beaten the odds. We stumbled through the checkpoint without knowing it, and the path ahead stretches open. The silence of the cosmos would simply reflect how rare our achievement is. We would be lonely, yes, but we would be survivors. The other possibility is far darker. The filter might lie ahead. Consider what that would mean. Every step we have taken, every evolutionary leap, every technological threshold would be ordinary, common, expected. Worlds everywhere would have managed the same journey. They would have crossed from chemistry to biology, from single cells to complexity, from animal instinct to conscious thought. They would have built cities and satellites and telescopes of their own, and then something stopped them, something waiting in their future, disguised as progress, destroyed them just as they began to reach outward. The great filter is like a final exam that most civilizations quietly fail. They arrive at the testing center, confident. They have come so far. They have solved so many problems. They sit down to face the questions, and they do not walk out again. The universe never learns their names. Here is the part that keeps some scientists awake at night. If we were to discover evidence of life elsewhere in our solar system, it would not be the triumphant news we imagine. Finding bacteria on Mars, detecting microbial signatures in the oceans of Europa. These discoveries would carry a terrible implication. Every step of evolution we share with other worlds is a step that is probably not the filter. If life arises easily on Mars, then the origin of life is not the bottleneck. If complex chemistry is common on icy moons, then those early hurdles were not the checkpoint. The more common those achievements turn out to be, the more certain we become that the filter still waits ahead. Finding simple life nearby would be bad news dressed in scientific excitement. It would mean we have not yet passed the test. It would suggest that whatever destroyed all those other civilizations is something we have not encountered yet. Something that lies in our future, patient and inevitable. Think about the trajectory of our species. We split the atom within a single human lifetime after first achieving powered flight. We built weapons capable of ending our own civilization and placed them in the hands of governments locked in rivalry. We are now teaching machines to think, editing the code of life itself, and reshaping our planet's climate in ways we barely understand. Each of these advances could be the entrance to the testing room. Each could be the moment where other species faltered. They reached for the same powers we are grasping, and those powers consumed them. The filter does not announce itself. It does not arrive as an obvious threat. It emerges from the very innovations that seem like victories. The breakthrough that finally gives a civilization the stars might be the same breakthrough that ensures they never reach them. And there is one more piece of this puzzle. For over a century now, we have been announcing ourselves. Radio signals, television broadcasts, radar pulses. They have been leaking from Earth since 1901, when Marconi first sent a signal across the Atlantic Ocean. Those transmissions did not stop at the horizon. They continued upward and outward, moving at the speed of light, spreading in an ever-growing sphere. The bubble of noise now extends outward from our world. It carries fragments of who we are, music and speeches, laughter and war declarations. The bubble cannot be recalled. It cannot be silenced. It simply grows, year by year, pushing deeper into the dark. For now, that bubble is small compared to the galaxy. It has touched only a tiny fraction of the stars that surround us. But it is growing. And if anything out there is listening, if anything has already passed through the filter and learned the rules of this silent forest, then our bubble is no longer invisible. We have begun our approach to the checkpoint. We do not know if we have already passed it. We do not know if we are walking toward it now. The only certainty is that the test exists. The empty river proves it. The silent stars confirm it. Whatever the filter is, it has claimed nearly everyone who came before. But there is another explanation for the silence. One that does not require a filter behind us or ahead. One that suggests the cosmos is not empty at all. This explanation asks a different question. What if the universe is crowded with intelligent life and every civilization has learned the same terrible lesson? What if the silence is not a mystery to be solved, but a rule that everyone else already understands? In 2008, Chinese science fiction author Liu Cixin proposed an answer that cuts through the Fermi Paradox with the cold logic of survival. He called it the dark forest theory. The name comes from a simple image, one that changes how you see the night sky once you understand it. Picture an infinite forest at night. Every tree is a star. Every branch is a planet. The canopy blocks all light from above. There is no moon. There are no trails. The darkness is complete. And somewhere among those countless trunks, hidden in shadow, are hunters. You cannot see them. You cannot hear them. But they are there. Each one is armed. Each one is afraid. And each one knows that anyone else in the forest is also armed, also afraid, and also invisible. This is the universe. The hunters do not know each other. They have never met. They share no language, no history, no culture. They are separated by distances so vast that a message sent today might arrive when the sender's civilization has already risen and fallen, when the forests of their homeworld have turned to deserts, when their descendants have evolved into something unrecognizable, or when their world has gone silent forever. In the dark forest, every civilization faces the same impossible problem. Resources are finite. Stars burn out. Planets grow cold. Habitable worlds are rare and precious. Any species that survives long enough will need more room, more energy, more matter, and any other species out there is competing for the same finite pool. This is not malice. It is mathematics. Consider what happens when you discover another civilization. You have detected their signal, perhaps a stray transmission, perhaps a deliberate beacon. Either way, you now know they exist. You know roughly where they are. You know they have technology, but that is all you know. You do not know their intentions. You cannot know their intentions. They are too far away for meaningful dialogue. A message takes decades to cross the void. A response takes decades more. By the time you receive an answer, their government has changed. Their technology has changed. Perhaps their entire species has changed. The beings who sent that response are not the same beings who received your original message. They might as well be a different civilization entirely. And here is where the logic turns cold. A peaceful civilization faces a terrible calculation. The species you have discovered seems friendly today. But what about in 1,000 years, 10,000, a million? Civilizations evolve. Cultures shift. A peaceful neighbor can become a hostile empire given enough time. And in cosmic terms, 1,000,000 years is nothing. It is less than a heartbeat in the life of a galaxy. The surprise is this: benevolence becomes irrational. Not because civilizations are cruel, but because uncertainty compounds over time. Even if you believe the other species means no harm today, you cannot guarantee what they will become. You cannot guarantee they will not perceive you as a threat. You cannot guarantee that their descendants, thousands of years from now, will share the same values as the beings you first contacted, and they are thinking the same thing about you. This creates what game theorists call a chain of suspicion. You suspect them. They suspect you. You suspect that they suspect you. They suspect that you suspect that they suspect you. The chain extends infinitely. Neither side can ever fully trust the other because the distances involved make verification impossible. There is no way to confirm intent, no way to build lasting agreements, no way to prove you are not a threat. Meanwhile, technology advances. A civilization capable of sending signals across light years is a civilization that can also send other things across light years. The details do not matter yet. What matters is the capability. Any species advanced enough to communicate is advanced enough to destroy. And an advanced civilization can project force across distances that make retaliation meaningless. The strike arrives before the warning. The target never sees it coming. In the dark forest, faced with absolute uncertainty and the knowledge that others can end your species without warning, there is only one move that guarantees survival: silence. Total, absolute, permanent silence. You do not transmit. You do not respond. You do not investigate signals from unknown sources. You make yourself invisible, and you stay invisible, because the cost of being seen is annihilation. To call out in the dark forest is to announce yourself as prey. The logic is inescapable. If you detect another civilization, you face a choice. You can attempt contact, knowing that every word you send reveals your position, knowing that they cannot verify your peaceful intentions any more than you can verify theirs, knowing that even if this generation is friendly, future generations are unknowable, or you can eliminate the threat before it becomes one. This sounds monstrous. It violates everything we value about cooperation and trust, and the bonds that hold societies together. But the dark forest theory does not describe how we wish the universe worked. It describes how rational actors might behave when the stakes are extinction, and the rules make trust impossible. The hunter who hesitates is the hunter who dies. The civilization that reaches out is the civilization that reveals its coordinates, and once those coordinates are known, they can never be unknown. The signal propagates forever. The target remains fixed. The strike can come today or in 10,000 years. The forest is patient. This is why the stars are silent. The silence we observe is not emptiness. It is fear. It is the sound of countless civilizations who learned the rules and chose to survive. They are out there, perhaps by the billions, each one crouched in darkness, each one listening, each one terrified of being heard. They do not call out because calling out is suicide. They do not answer signals because answering confirms their existence. They have chosen invisibility over connection because invisibility is the only path that does not end in fire. In the dark forest, there are no alliances, no federations, no galactic communities exchanging art and philosophy and the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 worlds. There is only the cold calculus of survival. every civilization for itself, every star a potential threat, every transmission a death sentence waiting to be carried out. And somewhere in this forest, on a small planet circling an ordinary star, one species has been shouting for over a century, sending signals into the dark, announcing its presence to anyone who might be listening. We have been walking through the forest with a lantern. We have been singing as we go, and we have no idea what might already be watching from the shadows, weighing the costs and benefits, deciding whether this strange new voice is worth the attention. The forest stretches in every direction, older than comprehension, darker than we ever imagined. And the silence that fills it is not a mystery. The silence is not emptiness. It is fear. Consider the nearest star to our sun, Proxima Centauri, a dim red ember floating in the cosmic dark. In astronomical terms, it is practically next door. In human terms, it might as well be unreachable. A message traveling at the speed of light, the fastest anything can move in this universe, takes over 4 years to reach Proxima Centauri. 4 years. A child born the day you send your greeting will be starting school before that signal arrives. And if someone there decides to respond, another 4 years pass before their answer returns. 8 years for the simplest possible exchange. Hello. Hello back. This is not a conversation. This is two people shouting across a canyon so vast that by the time the echo returns, they have forgotten what they said. The speed of light is the prison wall of the cosmos. Nothing escapes it. No message, no warning, no plea for understanding. Light moves at about 300,000 kilometers per second. That sounds impossibly fast. It is fast enough to circle Earth more than 7 times in a single heartbeat. Yet against the scale of interstellar distance, light crawls. And most civilizations would not be as close as Proxima Centauri. Consider a world 1,000 light years away. Your message arrives in the year 3025. Their response reaches your planet in the year 4025. 2,000 years for a single exchange. Empires rise and crumble in that span. Languages are born and die. The people who sent the message are not ancestors to the ones who received the reply. They are archaeological curiosities. In the dark forest, this makes diplomacy a fiction. Think of it this way. Every interstellar conversation is a centuries-long game of telephone. The original meaning degrades with each passing generation. The intent behind a message sent today will be interpreted by minds shaped by futures we cannot imagine. What seems clear to us may be incomprehensible to them. What they consider obvious may be alien to everything we believe. A handshake stretched across light years is not a handshake at all. It is a gesture frozen in amber, delivered to strangers who bear no resemblance to the ones you meant to greet. Actually, let me reframe that. It is not that trust is difficult across light years. It is that trust is meaningless. The entity you are trying to trust will be fundamentally different by the time your handshake arrives. Civilizations change. They evolve or decay or transform themselves beyond recognition. A culture that sends a message of peace in its era of optimism may collapse into authoritarianism before the reply arrives. A species that receives your greeting as one thing may become something entirely different over the transmission time. You cannot negotiate with the past. You cannot make treaties with ghosts. And that is what interstellar communication amounts to, an exchange of ghosts. Here is where it becomes truly unsettling. A simple greeting could be catastrophic. A message of peace sent today might be received centuries from now by a civilization that has become warlike. They look at your peaceful words and see weakness, or they see a trap, a sophisticated deception designed to lower their guard. Why would they assume honesty? In the dark forest, honesty is a luxury no one can afford. Your peaceful intent, genuine in the moment you transmitted it, becomes unverifiable, unprovable, suspicious. Or consider the reverse. You send a warning about your defensive capabilities, a show of strength meant to deter aggression. By the time it arrives, your technology has advanced beyond recognition, or collapsed entirely. The warning describes weapons that no longer exist, defenses that have been abandoned. Your show of strength becomes a confession of vulnerability. Every message you send is a postcard from a dying moment. The civilization that wrote it no longer exists in that form. The civilization that reads it will not exist in that form for much longer either. Communication across the void is not dialogue, it is archaeology. You are not speaking to another mind. You are leaving artifacts for future strangers to excavate and misinterpret. In the dark forest, this makes peace impossible. Consider what diplomacy requires. It requires conversation. It requires the ability to clarify misunderstandings before they escalate. It requires trust built through repeated interaction, promises kept, boundaries respected over time. None of this works across light years. A misunderstanding cannot be corrected for decades. A clarification arrives too late. The insult has already been internalized. The retaliation has already been launched. Picture two civilizations separated by 300 light years. One sends what it believes is a neutral inquiry, a request for information about the other's star system. The second civilization receives this message after 3 centuries of political upheaval. Their current government views all outside contact as hostile. They interpret the inquiry as reconnaissance for an invasion. They send a warning, aggressive, threatening. Their intent is defensive. They believe they are protecting themselves. The first civilization receives this warning after another 3 centuries. By now, the original message has been forgotten. The species has rebuilt its culture around different values. They see only unprovoked hostility from the void, an enemy they did not know they had. The cycle of suspicion deepens. Each response arrives stripped of context. Each reply lands in a world that has changed beyond all recognition. 2 civilizations that meant no harm to each other spiral toward conflict because the lag makes understanding impossible. This is interstellar diplomacy. It is like trying to negotiate peace through letters that take generations to deliver. By the time your grandchildren receive the reply, they have forgotten what the argument was about. Or worse, they have become someone new entirely. The rules of engagement that govern diplomacy on Earth assume real-time response. You can see the other party's reaction. You can adjust your tone. You can offer concessions and watch them be accepted or rejected. The feedback loop is immediate. Across light years, there is no feedback loop. There is only broadcast and hope. You speak into the dark and wait for your great-great-grandchildren to hear an answer. In the dark forest, rational actors do not take this gamble. The risk of catastrophic misunderstanding is too high. The possibility of clarification is too remote. The chance that your peaceful words will be received as intended by a civilization you cannot know is vanishingly small. Better to remain silent. Better to listen without speaking. Better to let the void remain empty of your voice. The prison of light speed does not just slow communication. It transforms it into something unrecognizable. Distance does not merely separate civilizations. It erases the possibility of connection. 2 species looking up at the same stars might yearn for contact with all their hearts. They might share values, share dreams, share the lonely ache of existence in an indifferent cosmos. And none of that would matter. The gulf between them is not merely spatial, it is temporal. They exist in different eras of meaning. Their messages cross not just space but centuries of change. By the time those messages arrive, the beings who sent them and the beings who receive them might as well be different species. This is the cruelty of the cosmos. It offers enough light to show us stars, enough radio waves to carry voices, enough physics to make communication theoretically possible, but it sets the rules so that true understanding remains forever out of reach. The death of distance is not death by emptiness. It is death by delay. The chasm that separates stars is not measured in kilometers alone. It is measured in lifetimes, in generations, in the slow erosion of meaning as messages drift through the dark toward recipients who may no longer exist. In the dark forest, This transforms every other civilization from a potential friend into an unknowable variable. You cannot predict what they will become. You cannot trust what they say they are. You can only know that by the time your message arrives, everything will have changed. And change, in the dark forest, is indistinguishable from threat. The dark forest is not a theory in the way we usually use that word. It is not speculation. It is not imagination. It is mathematics. Cold, indifferent mathematics that leads to only one conclusion. Strip away the poetry. Forget the metaphors about forests and hunters. What remains is an equation. Detection plus capability plus uncertainty equals destruction. Every variable in that equation points in the same direction. Start with detection. A civilization discovers another. Perhaps they intercept a stray signal. Perhaps they notice atmospheric changes on a distant world that suggest industry. The method does not matter. What matters is knowledge. One species now knows another exists. Move to capability. Any civilization advanced enough to detect signals across interstellar distances possesses enormous technological power. The same physics that allows them to listen across the void allows them to act across it. Basic physics tells us that kinetic energy increases with the square of velocity. Accelerate any object to sufficient speed and it becomes a weapon of annihilation. This is not speculation. This is high school physics carried to its logical end. Finish with uncertainty. The detecting civilization cannot know the intentions of the discovered one. Not now. Not ever. They cannot know if the other species values peace or conquest. They cannot know if it fears them or covets their resources. They cannot know if it is curious or paranoid. And here is the critical insight. Even if they could somehow verify that the other civilization is peaceful today, they cannot predict what it will become. 1,000 years from now, that peaceful species might undergo a revolution, a political shift, a technological breakthrough that makes them hungry for expansion, a religious awakening that demands the conversion or elimination of all other life. The detecting civilization cannot model these possibilities. It cannot calculate the probability of each future. All it can know is that the possibility of eventual hostility is never zero. When the stake of being wrong is the extinction of your entire species, every world you have colonized, every child who will ever be born, every poem and song and dream that your kind might create across the next billion years, how much uncertainty can you tolerate? The answer, mathematically, is none. Picture two strangers meeting in absolute darkness. Each knows the other is there. Each is armed. Neither can see the other's face. Neither can read expression or posture or intent. They cannot speak the same language. They cannot offer surrender or propose alliance. They can only act. One stranger might be kind, might desperately want peace, might be reaching out with an open hand, but the other stranger cannot see that hand, cannot know if it holds a gift or a weapon. In perfect darkness, with everything at stake, the rational choice is never to call out. The rational choice is to remain silent, or to strike before the other stranger has a chance to strike first. This is not cruelty. It is survival mathematics. On Earth, when two civilizations have met for the first time, the result follows a grim pattern. The civilization with superior technology absorbs, displaces, or destroys the other, not always through deliberate malice, sometimes through disease, sometimes through economic pressure, sometimes through the slow erosion of culture, but the outcome rarely favors the weaker party. The Aztec Empire fell to a few hundred conquistadors, not because the Spanish were evil, because they had horses and steel and guns, and smallpox. The meeting of unequal civilizations creates a power differential. That differential resolves in one direction. Scale this pattern upward. Imagine two civilizations separated not by an ocean, but by parsecs. One might be 1,000,000 years more advanced than the other. The gap between them would dwarf the gap between conquistadors and Aztecs. It would dwarf the gap between humans and bacteria. The more advanced civilization could end the less advanced one without effort, without notice, perhaps without even intending harm. In the face of such asymmetry, what rational actor announces their presence? What species lights a fire in a forest full of predators? Here is what the mathematics reveals. What makes it terrifying instead of merely grim? Even civilizations who desperately want peace will act as if they want war. A species might be gentle, might value all life, might dream of joining a galactic community of cooperation and shared knowledge. It does not matter. When they detect another civilization, they face the same equation everyone else faces. They cannot know if the other species shares their values. They cannot verify peaceful intent. They can only calculate risk. And the calculation always comes out the same way. If the other civilization is hostile and you do nothing, you die. If the other civilization is peaceful and you destroy them, you survive. If you wait to gather more information, you give them time to strike first. The only strategy that guarantees survival is the one that removes the threat before it can materialize. Good intentions are not relevant. Compassion is not relevant. The desire for friendship is not relevant. Only the math matters. And the math does not care what you hope for. This creates a universe of reluctant predators, species that never wanted to harm anyone, forced by pure logic to destroy anything they find. Civilizations that mourn every strike they launch, but launch them anyway because the alternative is gambling their entire species on the goodwill of strangers. The equation does not ask what you believe. It asks what you can afford to risk. And when the risk is everything, the only affordable answer is nothing. Consider a civilization that chooses differently, that decides to take the chance, that broadcasts greetings and waits with open arms for a reply. What happens to them? If they are lucky, they contact another idealist. Two species who both rolled the dice and both got fortunate. But even then, a third party might be watching. A civilization that played the game more carefully. That stayed silent while others announced themselves. That noted the positions of both broadcasting species and made its own cold calculation. The third party faces no dilemma. Two potential threats have revealed themselves. The third party can eliminate both while remaining hidden. No witnesses, no risk. Just clean mathematics. Over cosmic time, the idealists vanish. The species that trusted, that hoped, that reached out in friendship. They are found and eliminated by the species that calculated correctly. Natural selection operates on civilizations just as it operates on organisms. The galaxy favors the silent, the cautious, the ones who never announce their position. This is why the Dark Forest is not a story about evil. It is a story about survival arithmetic. The cruelest universe is not one filled with malevolent species. It is one where even the kindest, most hopeful civilizations are forced by pure logic to act as predators. The silence of the cosmos begins to make a different kind of sense. Not empty, full of watchers who understand the equation, full of species who learned the same mathematics and reached the same conclusion. Speak and be found and face destruction. The only winning move is to never play. Perhaps somewhere in the dark, a civilization is listening to our transmissions right now. Not hostile, not hungry for conquest, just doing the math, calculating whether we might become a threat in 1,000,000 years, weighing the cost of action against the risk of inaction. The equation sits in front of them. Detection, capability, uncertainty, and a variable called survival that outweighs everything else. Perhaps somewhere in the dark, a civilization is doing exactly that, calculating, weighing, deciding. But what about us? What have we done besides broadcast our presence into the void? We have also listened. For generation after generation, in places where the air is thin and the stars burn bright overhead, humanity has built machines designed to hear, not to speak, just to listen, to catch the faintest whisper from somewhere beyond our own small world. The instruments sit in deserts, on mountaintops, in valleys shielded from the hum of human electronics. They point their massive metal ears toward the sky and wait. They have been waiting for a very long time. Picture an observatory in the pre-dawn hours, the air cold enough to sting your lungs. No city lights for hundreds of miles, just the dish, rotating slowly, tracking something invisible. The hum of cooling systems, the soft click of data being recorded, and silence, always silence. These places are lighthouses in reverse. A lighthouse stands at the edge of darkness and sends light outward, warning ships away from danger. These observatories stand in the darkness and wait for light to find them. They send nothing. They only receive. And night after night, year after year, what they receive is emptiness. In Puerto Rico, nestled in a natural sinkhole in the Karst Hills, there once sat one of humanity's greatest ears, the Arecibo Observatory. Its dish stretched 305 meters across. That is wider than 3 football fields laid end to end. It was not steerable like other telescopes. Instead, the dish was fixed in the ground, and a platform suspended above it could be adjusted to catch signals from different parts of the sky. For almost 60 years, Arecibo listened. The scientists who worked there understood something that most people never consider. The cosmos is not quiet because we have not been paying attention. We have been paying attention. We have been paying attention with some of the most sophisticated listening equipment ever constructed. And the cosmos has given us nothing in return. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence. SETI. The name sounds almost hopeful. A search implies that something might be found, that the effort has a purpose, that the listening might one day be rewarded. SETI has analyzed billions of signals. Billions. Each one examined for patterns that could not be natural, for structure that might indicate intelligence, for anything that stands out against the background noise of the universe. Every time, the result has been the same. Static, pulsars, quasars, the death screams of distant stars, the whisper of cosmic radiation left over from the first moments of existence. All of it natural, all of it indifferent, none of it saying hello. The people who dedicate their careers to this work are a particular kind of patient. They arrive at their posts knowing that they will probably never hear what they are listening for. They adjust their instruments. They refine their algorithms. They filter out interference from satellites and cell phones and the electronic chatter of modern civilization. And then they listen some more. There is something almost sacred about it, like monks in a silent order, devoting their lives to contemplation, to waiting for a voice that may never speak. The ritual continues regardless of results. The faith persists despite the silence. You might think that after so many years of nothing, the effort would feel pointless. But the scientists understand something else. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The universe is vast beyond comprehension. Our instruments, for all their sophistication, can only hear so far, can only detect certain kinds of signals, can only point in one direction at a time. Maybe the signal came while we were looking somewhere else. Maybe it was too faint. Maybe it was encoded in a way we do not yet understand. Maybe it is coming right now, traveling through space at the speed of light, still years away from reaching our dishes. Or maybe there is nothing to hear. That possibility sits at the edge of every observation. The chance that the silence is not a failure of our instruments, but a feature of the universe itself, that we are listening for something that does not exist, or something that exists but will never speak. December 2020. The cables that held Arecibo's receiver platform above the dish began to fail. Engineers had known for months that the structure was compromised. Tropical storms had weakened it. Age had corroded the metal. Plans were being made for repairs, for stabilization, for keeping the great ear functional. Then, early one morning, the cables snapped. The 900-ton receiver platform crashed into the dish below. The impact was captured on video. You can watch it. the structure that had listened to the cosmos for nearly 60 years folding in on itself, metal screaming as it tore, dust rising in the morning light, and then stillness. Our ear to the cosmos literally fell apart. The universe did not pause. No signal emerged from the wreckage saying, "Here we are." No voice called out to acknowledge what humanity had lost. The dishes had pointed skyward for 6 decades, and the sky had answered with nothing. And now, one of the greatest dishes was gone. There are other listening stations, other projects. The Allen Telescope Array in California, the Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia, facilities in Australia and South Africa. The search continues. But Arecibo was special. Its size, its sensitivity, its history, gone in a few seconds of structural failure. Some people found poetry in the collapse. The idea that our tools for listening are fragile, temporary things. That even our best efforts to reach beyond ourselves can fall apart without warning. That the silence we have received might outlast every instrument we build to measure it. The listening continues elsewhere. New dishes, new algorithms, new hope, but the pattern holds. We point our instruments at the sky. We filter the noise. We search for patterns, and the cosmos offers us nothing we can interpret as intentional. Nothing that says yes, we are here too. The silence is not for lack of trying. That is the uncomfortable truth. We have tried. We have listened with everything we have, and either there is no one speaking, or they are speaking in ways we cannot detect, or they have chosen not to speak at all. There is one more uncomfortable truth to sit with. While we have been listening so carefully for voices in the dark, we have also been talking. Our own signals have been streaming outward for over a century now. Radio waves carrying our music, our news, our wars, our celebrations, an expanding sphere of human noise drifting through space. We built machines to listen for others, but we never built machines to stay quiet ourselves. The irony is difficult to ignore. We strain to hear whispers from the stars while shouting into the void without restraint. That expanding sphere of human noise. Let us sit with that for a moment, because it is not abstract, it is not theoretical, it has a birthday, and it has contents, and it is out there right now, moving through the dark at 300,000 kilometers per second. The birthday is December 1901. An Italian inventor named Guglielmo Marconi sat in a cold room in Newfoundland. He was trying to prove that radio waves could cross the Atlantic Ocean. Before that day, no one knew if it was possible. The curvature of the Earth should have blocked the signal, but Marconi was stubborn, and the atmosphere was kinder than expected. The signal was simple, 3 dots, the letter S in Morse code. It traveled from England to Canada, hopping across the ocean in ways that scientists still debate today. The transmission lasted only a moment, but that moment changed everything, because the signal did not stop at Newfoundland. Radio waves do not know where you want them to go. They do not respect borders or intentions. When Marconi sent those 3 dots across the Atlantic, the signal kept going, through the receiver, yes, but also upward, outward, into the sky, past the atmosphere, into the void between worlds. That was the first leak, the first unintentional announcement, the first time Earth said something the universe could hear. Those 3 dots are still traveling. They have been traveling for over a century now, moving away from us at the fastest speed anything can move. By now, they are far beyond any world we could visit in a lifetime, far beyond any star we have named. Just 3 dots of electromagnetic energy, fading but not gone, carrying the signature of artificial origin into the emptiness, and they were followed by everything else. After Marconi came the explosion, radio stations, television broadcasts, radar systems, military transmissions, weather satellites, cell phones. Every electromagnetic whisper humanity has made since 1901 has done the same thing. It has radiated outward, escaping our planet, joining that first signal in its endless journey. The sphere is now nearly 200 light-years in diameter. That means it encompasses hundreds of star systems, hundreds of suns with their own planets, their own possibilities, now bathed in the faint echoes of human technology. What are those echoes? What do they contain? Everything. The answer is everything. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's voice is out there. December 7th, 1941. He stood before Congress and declared that the attack on Pearl Harbor would live in infamy. Those words were broadcast over radio. They traveled across the nation, and they did not stop at the coastlines. They kept going. Roosevelt's declaration of war is now over 80 light years from Earth, washing over star systems whose light takes a human lifetime to reach us. The Beatles are out there. February 1964. They performed on The Ed Sullivan Show, and 73 million Americans watched. The broadcast went out over the airwaves. It went up. It went out. Somewhere in the cosmos, the first chords of All My Loving are arriving at a world that has never known music, or perhaps a world that has known music for 1 billion years and recognizes the pattern instantly for what it is. A signal, a beacon, a confession. The countdown to the first moon landing is out there. July 1969. The voices of mission control, the static of the transmission, the words spoken by a man standing on another world for the first time. Those sounds have traveled over 50 light years. They have passed stars that ancient humans used for navigation. They have reached worlds that existed before our sun ignited. These signals cannot be recalled. This is the part that gets me. These signals, Roosevelt's voice, the Beatles, Neil Armstrong's words, they are still out there. They will still be traveling through the void long after everyone who remembers them is gone. There is something haunting in that, something beautiful and terrible. The bubble of noise has become a terrifying flare in the night. It is not progress. It is not civilization reaching toward the stars. It is a permanent confession of vulnerability traveling through the void. Every signal an admission that we exist, that we are here, that we do not yet understand the rules. And here is the part that unsettles me most. The very first signals to escape Earth were not intentional messages of peace. They were not greetings or mathematical proofs or golden records of human achievement. They were chaos, static, the accidental byproducts of early technology sputtering to life. Electromagnetic noise from generators and transmitters that leaked energy into the sky without anyone realizing it. The universe's first impression of humanity is not our art or our philosophy or our hope. It is static, fragments, confusion. We did not introduce ourselves. We simply made noise, and the noise escaped. And now it is a permanent record that can never be erased. Consider what this means. If something is listening, if something has the technology to detect these faint whispers from across the light years, it did not receive a message. It received evidence. Evidence of a species that discovered electromagnetic transmission and immediately began leaking signals in every direction without thought or caution. That is the signature we have written across the cosmos. Not intelligence, not wisdom, just noise, expanding forever, carrying the unmistakable fingerprint of artificial origin. These broadcasts are ghosts that will outlive our civilization by millions of years. Long after our cities have crumbled, long after our species has evolved into something else or vanished entirely, the signals will still be traveling, fainter and fainter, yes, but never gone, never silent, carrying the pattern of intentional transmission through the dark. A receiver sensitive enough could reconstruct them, could hear Roosevelt's voice 1 million years from now, arriving at some distant world, could detect the harmonics of human music, the rhythm of our speech, the unmistakable structure of technology. We have written ourselves into the permanent record of the cosmos, and we cannot take it back. The bubble expands at the speed of light. It is the fastest anything can move, and it moves in every direction at once, a sphere growing larger with every passing second. By the time you finish listening to this sentence, the bubble has grown by hundreds of thousands of kilometers. By the time you fall asleep tonight, it will have expanded by billions more. There is no off switch. There is no way to catch up to the signals and pull them back. They are gone, traveling through the dark, and they will travel forever. We are like someone who lit a signal fire on a hilltop without understanding that the forest extends for 1,000 miles in every direction. The fire is bright. The fire is visible, and we did not stop to wonder who else might be watching the sky for flames. The logic of the forest suggests that fire attracts attention. The logic of the forest suggests that attention is dangerous. The logic of the forest suggests that civilizations who announce themselves do not survive to regret it. We have been announcing ourselves for over a century. The announcement is now nearly 200 light years wide. And somewhere in that sphere of expanding noise, somewhere in the hundreds of star systems now bathed in our electromagnetic confessions, something might be listening, something might be calculating, something might be deciding what to do with the knowledge that we exist. Something might be deciding what to do with the knowledge that we exist. But here is a question worth considering. If civilizations like us exist throughout the galaxy, if they've had billions of years to build and expand and grow, why don't we see them? Not their signals, their structures, their monuments, the physical evidence of their ambition. In the 1960s, a physicist named Freeman Dyson proposed something extraordinary. He reasoned that any civilization advanced enough would eventually face a simple problem: energy. Stars produce unimaginable amounts of it. Our sun releases enough energy every second to power human civilization for hundreds of thousands of years. Most of that energy just radiates away into empty space, wasted. Dyson imagined a solution. Build a structure around your entire star, a shell, a swarm of collectors, something massive enough to capture all that escaping energy and put it to use. These became known as Dyson spheres. The concept captured imaginations for decades, but it also created a prediction, a testable one. Any structure that captures a star's visible light would still radiate waste heat. That heat would escape as infrared radiation. A Dyson sphere wouldn't be invisible. It would glow in the infrared spectrum like a dim ember where a bright star should be, and we could detect that glow from across the galaxy. We built telescopes to look for exactly this signature. The WISE telescope scanned the entire sky in infrared light. The Spitzer telescope peered deeper into specific regions. Together, they examined billions upon billions of stars, searching for that telltale heat, searching for the fingerprints of engineering on a cosmic scale. They found nothing. Zero candidates that couldn't be explained by natural phenomena, dust clouds, stellar debris, the ordinary processes of the universe. Not a single structure, not one sphere, not anywhere in the billions of stars surveyed. For decades, this absence was interpreted as evidence against the existence of advanced civilizations. If they existed, we would see their works. We would detect their ambition. The logic seemed sound. Build big enough, and you cannot hide. In the dark forest, this logic inverts completely. Consider what building a Dyson sphere actually means. You have wrapped your entire star in a shell of artificial material. You have created a structure visible across thousands of light years to anyone with decent infrared sensors. You have announced not just your existence, but your capabilities. You have proven you can harvest stellar energy. You have demonstrated industrial capacity beyond anything a primitive civilization could threaten. And you have marked your exact location in space for any observer who cares to look. It is the equivalent of building a bonfire in the middle of a silent, hostile wilderness. A bonfire that burns for millions of years. A bonfire that cannot be hidden or extinguished. Silence is a survival strategy. The oldest civilizations understand this. They did not survive by building monuments. They survived by becoming invisible. Think about creatures that live in the deepest parts of Earth's oceans, miles below the surface, where no sunlight penetrates. In that absolute darkness, many species produce light, bioluminescence. They glow to attract prey, to find mates, to communicate, but not all of them. Some of the oldest deep-sea species produce no light at all. They have evolved in the opposite direction. They move through the crushing darkness without announcing themselves. They have learned that visibility means death. Advanced civilizations that survive long enough may have evolved the same way. Not biologically, technologically, culturally. They have learned to produce no light, no waste heat, no signals, no evidence of their presence. They are engineers of invisibility who have learned to blend into cosmic background radiation like camouflage, their entire civilizations hidden behind the natural noise of the universe. The background radiation of the cosmos is not truly uniform. It has tiny fluctuations, natural variations from the earliest moments of existence. A civilization clever enough might learn to hide their heat signatures within those variations. They might radiate their waste energy in patterns that mimic the natural hum of the universe itself, indistinguishable from the cosmic static that pervades all of space. They would be there, but we would never know. In the dark forest, advanced civilizations do not build monuments. They dismantle them. The most successful species in the galaxy may have looked at their ancestors' grand engineering projects and recognized them for what they truly were. Not achievements, liabilities, targets. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy may have intentionally dismantled any megastructures their ancestors built, recognizing that monuments are gravestones waiting to be carved. Every Dyson sphere ever constructed might have been taken apart within a few million years of completion, not by enemies, by the builders themselves. Once they understood the forest, once they realized what visibility meant, once they calculated the odds, a young civilization might celebrate the completion of its first stellar engineering project. A few generations later, wiser descendants might work frantically to erase it, to return their star to an ordinary appearance, to blend back into the natural population of the galaxy. The ruins of such projects might still exist, partial structures, debris fields that look like natural asteroid belts, evidence we might detect if we knew what to look for. But the finished spheres, the glowing monuments, the obvious signatures of intelligence, those would be the rarest things in the cosmos, because anything that obvious does not last long. Silence is a survival strategy. The civilizations that understand this shape their entire existence around invisibility. Their cities do not leak light into space. Their communications do not use radio waves that scatter in all directions. Their power systems do not produce waste heat that escapes to the stars. They have become ghosts, deliberate ghosts, present but undetectable, thriving but silent. The galaxy might be crowded with such civilizations, billions of them, all watching, all listening, all hiding from each other, each one convinced that announcement means extinction, each one working constantly to reduce its profile, to dim its signature, to vanish into the background noise of the cosmos. We search the sky for evidence of intelligence and find only natural phenomena, stars and dust, and the ordinary processes of physics. But the dark forest suggests a different interpretation. What we see as absence might actually be mastery. What we see as emptiness might actually be discipline. What we see as loneliness might actually be the crowded silence of countless civilizations who have all learned the same terrible lesson. The dark spaces between the stars may not be empty at all. They may be heavily populated with hidden empires, civilizations that have existed for millions of years, cultures that have risen to heights we cannot imagine, technologies that would seem like magic, all of it invisible, all of it silent, all of it watching the night sky for anyone foolish enough to make themselves known. And somewhere in that silent congregation, our radio bubble continues to expand, a sphere of noise pushing outward through a galaxy full of listeners who long ago learned to never speak back. The weapons of the dark forest do not require technology beyond our imagination. They require only physics, the same physics we teach in universities, the same equations written on chalkboards in classrooms around the world. This is perhaps the most unsettling truth of all. Consider a rock, an ordinary asteroid, nothing special about it, just mass and momentum drifting through the void. Now accelerate that rock, push it faster and faster until it reaches 90% of the speed of light. At that velocity, something transforms. The rock is no longer a rock. It has become a weapon of absolute destruction. A single grain of sand moving at 90% light speed carries the energy of a nuclear warhead. One grain, smaller than the speck you might brush from your sleeve. At those velocities, kinetic energy scales exponentially. The mathematics are merciless. The formula does not care about intent or morality. It cares only about mass and velocity. A boulder the size of a house, accelerated to such speeds, would strike a planet with the force of extinction. Not the extinction of a species, the extinction of everything. The atmosphere would ignite. The oceans would boil away in minutes. The crust would crack and fold, and there would be no warning. At 90% of light speed, the projectile arrives almost as soon as its light does. You see it and you die in the same instant. This is the quiet folding of light and mass into devastation. No heroic battles, no second chances, just absence. The civilizations that understand the dark forest need not develop exotic technologies. They need not master dimensions we cannot perceive or energies we cannot fathom. They only need patience and fear. A rock accelerated to a fraction of light speed becomes a spear of unimaginable force. There is no shield against it. No defense system that could intercept something moving that fast. No warning that would give you time to flee. The universe provides all the raw materials. Asteroids drift everywhere. The gravity of stars can be harnessed for acceleration. A species with fusion propulsion and a few centuries of preparation could construct weapons capable of sterilizing entire solar systems. The knowledge required is not advanced. It is basic mechanics. Force equals mass times acceleration. Energy equals half the mass times velocity squared. These are equations we derived 3 centuries ago. Any civilization that discovers radio waves will soon discover nuclear fission. Any civilization that masters nuclear fission will soon understand relativistic physics. And any civilization that understands relativistic physics will understand, with terrible clarity, how easily a world can end. The knowledge of how to destroy a planet is one of the first things a technological species learns. It comes early, long before interstellar travel, long before the wisdom to know when not to use it. Relativistic missiles are only the beginning. Directed energy weapons offer another path to extinction. A beam of focused radiation, powerful enough and precisely aimed, could sterilize a planet from light years away. The target world would receive no messenger before the killing light arrived. One day, the sun rises normally. The next day, the sky splits with fire that burns through stone. Such weapons could be deployed from vast distances, hidden in the darkness between stars, powered by captured stellar energy, patient, waiting for centuries or millennia until the geometry aligns. Then, a pulse of energy crosses the void. By the time it arrives, the civilization that launched it might no longer exist. But the beam continues. Physics does not forget. Even more insidious are the quiet weapons. Self-replicating machines designed to consume. Microscopic devices that could be launched across interstellar distances, dormant for thousands of years as they drift through the cold. When they finally arrive, they activate. They begin to reproduce, using the raw materials of the target world, converting soil and water and air into more of themselves. These machines would need no guidance once released, no civilization monitoring their progress. They would simply follow their programming, multiplying until there was nothing left to consume, a thriving world reduced to grey dust over decades. No explosions, no fire, just a slow erasure. The planet would remain in orbit. Its mountains would still cast shadows, but nothing would move, nothing would grow. The silence would be absolute. The terrible efficiency of these weapons lies in their simplicity. You do not need to conquer a world. You do not need to understand its inhabitants or negotiate with its leaders. You simply end it, from distances so vast that retaliation becomes impossible, from hiding places so dark that the victim never knows who struck. This is not cinematic. There are no fleets engaged in dramatic combat, no desperate last stands, no heroes sacrificing themselves as music swells. The reality is quieter and more complete. A world exists, then it does not. The transition requires no narrative. It simply happens. If we knew, really knew, that the universe worked this way, would we hide? Would we go quiet? Or is the need to reach out, to call into the darkness, so fundamental to what we are that we would speak anyway, even knowing the cost? I do not have an answer to that question. I suspect no one does. The pull toward connection runs deep in us. We are a species that carves messages on golden records and hurls them into the void. We point dishes at the stars and listen for anyone at all. The loneliness feels unbearable. Perhaps the risk of speaking feels smaller than the certainty of eternal silence. But the physics remains indifferent to our emotional needs. A rock is a rock until velocity transforms it. Energy is energy until it meets atmosphere and flesh. The equations do not care that we ached to find companionship among the stars. In the dark forest, destruction leaves no evidence of battle. A world struck by a relativistic projectile would show signs of massive impact, but impacts happen naturally. Asteroids strike planets constantly across cosmic time. A clever observer might wonder about the trajectory or timing, but proving intent would be nearly impossible. The crime scene looks like an accident. A world consumed by self-replicating machines might eventually regenerate. Given millions of years, new life could arise. The scars would heal. The evidence would erode. Future astronomers studying that solar system would find nothing unusual. Just another barren rock orbiting an ordinary star. They would never know what stood there once, what songs were sung, what questions were asked. This is the horror beneath the silence. Not dramatic extinction events that announce themselves across the galaxy, but quiet removals that leave no trace. Civilizations erased so thoroughly that even their absence goes unnoticed. The galaxy continues on. Stars burn. Planets orbit. And the empty space where a species once dreamed simply remains empty. We search for signs of cosmic warfare and find none. We scan the skies for debris fields and battle scars and the radioactive signatures of great conflicts. We find nothing. The dark forest suggests this is not because such violence never occurs. It is because such violence is too efficient to leave witnesses. We look at the night sky and see ancient light. What we rarely consider is that some of that light comes from worlds that died. Not naturally, not slowly, but deliberately erased. Across the galaxy, astronomers have catalogued planets that seem wrong, worlds that defy easy explanation. Rocky cores exposed where thick atmospheres should cling, gas giants stripped down to their bones, solar systems with gaps in them, like teeth missing from a jaw. We observe these anomalies and reach for natural explanations. Stellar winds, gravitational chaos, the violence of young star systems settling into their final configurations. In the dark forest, there is another explanation. These are not geological curiosities. They are crime scenes. The evidence has been scattered across light years, hidden in plain sight among the debris of ordinary cosmic processes. We look at them and see physics. Perhaps we should see murder. Consider what happens when a relativistic projectile strikes a world with an atmosphere. The impact does not merely create a crater, it tears the air away. The shock wave propagates outward at velocities that strip molecules from gravitational wells. In hours, an ocean of breathable gas becomes a trail of particles streaming into the void. The planet remains. Its mass endures. But everything that made it alive is simply gone. We have found worlds like this, planets orbiting close to their parent stars, baked and barren, their surfaces scoured smooth. We attribute this to stellar radiation, the constant bombardment of particles and energy over billions of years. And perhaps that is the truth. Perhaps nature carved these gravestones without any hand to guide the chisel. But perhaps not. In the dark forest, every barren world becomes a question. Every scorched surface becomes a possible epitaph. A civilization lived here once. It built cities and wondered at its own sky. It asked the same questions we ask. It reached out, yearning for connection, and something answered. Not with words, with annihilation. The terrible genius of such attacks is their deniability. A world struck at relativistic speeds shows the same signatures as a world struck by a natural impactor. Craters, debris fields, the scattered remnants of what existed before. An observer arriving millions of years later would find no evidence of intent, no smoking gun, no manifest declaring war, just another dead rock circling an indifferent sun. Every barren, scorched planet we observe could be a tombstone for a civilization that made the same mistake we are making now. Broadcasting, hoping, believing that the universe rewards openness with friendship. The universe rewards nothing. It simply is. I want you to consider something uncomfortable. When we survey distant solar systems, we find fewer Earth-like planets than our models predict. Worlds in the habitable zone, with the right mass and composition to hold liquid water, should be more common than they appear. We adjust our models. We refine our assumptions. We tell ourselves we simply misunderstood the formation process. In the dark forest, there is a simpler explanation. Those worlds existed. They were warm once. They held oceans. And then they were sterilized, one by one, as each made the fatal mistake of announcing its presence. The silence we observe is not the absence of life. It is the aftermath of countless extinctions. Ghost planets, that is what they are. Worlds that still orbit but no longer live. Their cores still radiate heat from formation. Their surfaces still reflect starlight. But nothing moves on them, nothing thinks. The intelligence that once inhabited them has been reduced to atoms scattered across their crusts, indistinguishable from the minerals that were always there. We look at these worlds through our telescopes and see geology, rock formations, atmospheric composition, orbital mechanics. We catalogue them in databases and move on to the next target. What we fail to see are the epitaphs written in their barrenness, the stories that ended in silence. Here is the part that haunts me. A civilization destroyed by a relativistic strike would simply stop. There would be no ruins in the traditional sense. No crumbling towers or overgrown highways. The energy released would vaporize everything. Molecular bonds would break. Complex structures would become simple elements. 100 million years of cultural development would disappear in microseconds. To an outside observer arriving afterward, the planet would look like it never developed life at all. The same basalt plains, the same wind-swept deserts, the evidence of tectonic activity and volcanic eruptions that any lifeless world might display. You could walk across its surface and never know you were treading on graves. That is the horror. Not spectacular destruction, but invisible erasure. We imagine alien civilizations leaving behind artifacts, monuments, satellites, something to prove they existed. But in the dark forest, the successful predators do not leave witnesses. They do not leave evidence. They strike and vanish, and the only testimony to their violence is silence itself. In the dark forest, absence is the only record. When astronomers identify a planet that should have developed life but did not, they calculate probabilities. They factor in solar radiation and asteroid bombardment, and the 1,000 natural disasters that can snuff out biospheres. What they do not factor in is intention, the possibility that something looked at that world and decided it should not exist. We are like investigators arriving at a crime scene that has been scrubbed clean, every fingerprint wiped away, every trace of violence explained by natural causes. We write reports that say accident or bad luck, or the universe is simply harsh. We close our files and move on, but the bodies are still there, buried in the regolith, dissolved into the bedrock, present in every atom of those silent worlds, even if we lack the tools to recognize them. Think about the planets we have classified as uninhabitable, the ones we dismiss as too hot, too cold, too barren to merit further study. How many of them were once like Earth? How many held forests and cities and creatures that looked up at unfamiliar stars and wondered if anyone else was out there? They found out. The attacks would not look like attacks. No fleet of warships, no declaration, no warning, just a sudden end. The atmospheric readings would change, the infrared signature would shift, and then, for any surviving observers, there would simply be one less point of light in the census of living worlds. We scan the galaxy for signs of technology, for radio signals, for laser pulses, for the organized patterns that would betray intelligent activity. We find nothing, and we interpret that nothing as evidence that we are alone, or early, or special. In the dark forest, that nothing is evidence of something else entirely. It is the silence of a graveyard, the quiet that follows a massacre too vast and too ancient for us to comprehend. Every empty world is a warning we cannot read. Every barren surface is a story we will never hear. They called out into the darkness, just as we have called out. They waited for an answer, just as we wait, and the answer came, not in words, but in fire, not in greeting, but in ending. We observe these ghost planets from across the void and see data points, coordinates, spectral analyses. What we should see are mirrors, reflections of a possible future, civilizations that once stood where we now stand, looking up, hoping, reaching out. They are silent now, and we continue to shout. The evidence surrounds us, written in barren rock and missing atmospheres, written in the gaps between stars and the strange emptiness of systems that should be teeming with worlds. We lack the vocabulary to read it, or perhaps we lack the courage. In the dark forest, the dead do not speak. They do not need to. Their silence speaks for them. It echoes across the light years, filling the void between stars with a message we refuse to hear. Be quiet, hide, or join them in the darkness. The dead speak through absence. But what if the living are already here, watching from the dark? In October of 2017, astronomers detected something unusual. An object was passing through our solar system. It came from interstellar space, the first visitor from beyond our cosmic neighborhood that we had ever seen. They named it Oumuamua. In Hawaiian, the word means scout or messenger. The name felt appropriate, perhaps too appropriate. Oumuamua was strange. Its shape was unlike any asteroid or comet we had catalogued. It was elongated. Some described it as cigar-shaped, others as flat like a disc. The proportions were unusual. The object tumbled end over end as it traveled, rotating in ways that seemed almost deliberate. And then there was the acceleration. As Oumuamua left our solar system, it sped up, not dramatically, just a slight push, a gentle increase in velocity that our models could not fully explain. Comets do this sometimes. Ice on their surfaces vaporizes in the heat of the sun, creating tiny jets that nudge them along. But Oumuamua showed no visible tail, no cloud of gas or dust, no sign of the outgassing that should have accompanied such acceleration. It was probably natural, a fragment of some distant world, torn loose and sent wandering across the emptiness, a shard of rock or frozen nitrogen, tumbling through the void for longer than our species has existed. Probably. We will never know for certain. Oumuamua came and went too quickly for thorough study. By the time we understood what we were looking at, it was already receding into the darkness. We pointed our telescopes at its shrinking form and gathered what data we could. Then it was gone, just passing through. If you wanted to observe a solar system without revealing yourself, how would you do it? You would not send a ship with engines blazing and signals broadcasting. You would not arrive with fanfare. You would send something quiet, something patient, something that could drift for eons, waiting. Picture buoys floating in an infinite ocean. They do not move on their own. They ride the currents, carried by forces beyond their control. They record everything and transmit nothing. They wait, perhaps for specific triggers we cannot imagine, a certain frequency of radio emission, a particular chemical signature in an atmosphere, a flash of nuclear detonation. These hypothetical probes would not announce themselves. They would simply watch. And when the moment came, when the trigger was pulled, they would act, or report, or mark a location for later attention. We might have passed one already. We might have passed 100. In the vastness of interstellar space, even 1,000,000 such devices would be scattered so thin that the odds of encountering one seem impossibly small. But we encountered Oumuamua, the first interstellar object we ever detected, and it behaved strangely. That is either coincidence or it is not. In the 1970s, an astronomer named John Ball proposed an idea. He called it the zoo hypothesis. The concept was simple. Perhaps advanced civilizations know we are here. Perhaps they have known for a very long time. And perhaps they are choosing not to make contact. Not because they fear us, not because they want to destroy us, but because they are studying us. Think about how we observe wildlife. We build blinds and hides. We set up cameras in the undergrowth. We tag animals and release them, tracking their movements from satellites they cannot comprehend. We watch without interfering, because interference would contaminate the data. The subjects would change their behavior. The study would be ruined. What if we are the subjects? The zoo hypothesis suggests that Earth might be a preserve, a protected area where a young species is allowed to develop naturally. The watchers would keep their distance. They would observe but never touch. They would learn everything about us while we learned nothing about them. It is a comforting thought in some ways. It suggests that the silence is not hostile, that someone out there cares enough to let us grow on our own, that we are not alone in the universe, merely unaware of our audience. But comfort and truth are not the same thing. Consider what Oumuamua did, or rather, what it did not do. It passed through our solar system. It came close enough to the sun that we could detect it. It traveled through a region of space we actively monitor with telescopes designed to spot exactly this kind of object, and then it left. No signal, no course correction, no attempt to make contact. If Oumuamua was natural, this means nothing. A rock does not speak. A fragment of distant ice does not care about the planets it passes. It was an accident of trajectories, a chance encounter between our home and a wandering piece of cosmic debris. But if Oumuamua was not natural, its silence is remarkable. An alien probe capable of crossing the void between stars, entering a system with obvious signs of technological activity, would have every reason to make itself known, unless it had orders not to, unless observation required invisibility, unless the mission was simply to watch, to record, to pass through, and report back. That silence is either meaningless or terrifying. We have no way to determine which. The absence of proof is not proof of absence. This is something scientists say when they want to remain open to possibilities that have not been confirmed. We cannot prove that Oumuamua was a probe. We cannot prove that it was not. We cannot prove that sentinel systems exist, drifting in the dark between stars. We cannot prove that we are being watched. But we also cannot prove that we are not. If there are watchers hidden in the void, they already know about us. Our radio bubble has been expanding for over a century now. Any civilization with the technology to build interstellar probes would certainly have the technology to detect our transmissions. They would know the location of our planet. They would know the frequencies we use. They would have samples of our languages, our music, our fears. They would have heard us calling out, and they would have chosen not to respond. Maybe they are waiting. Maybe they are testing us. Maybe they want to see what we do next, whether we grow wise or destroy ourselves. Maybe our development is being monitored by protocols older than our species, algorithms designed to evaluate civilizations based on criteria we cannot guess. Or Maybe there are no watchers at all. Maybe Oumuamua was just a rock, and the zoo hypothesis is wishful thinking dressed up as science. Maybe we really are alone, shouting into a void that contains nothing but empty space and silent stars. The honest answer is that we do not know. We may never know, but consider this. If advanced civilizations do exist, and if they have survived long enough to develop the technology to monitor the galaxy, they would have learned certain lessons. They would understand that contact is dangerous. They would understand that revealing yourself invites attention you cannot control. They would have learned to watch without being seen. And so the question lingers. When we look up at the night sky and wonder if anyone is looking back, are we staring into emptiness, or are we staring into eyes that have been watching us for longer than we can imagine? The darkness does not answer. It never does. We keep searching anyway. We build our telescopes and point them outward. We listen for signals that never come. And sometimes we do more than listen. Sometimes we reach out deliberately, sending messages into the void, hoping that someone, somewhere, will hear us and respond. In 1974, a group of scientists gathered in the mountains of Puerto Rico. They stood beneath a great bowl carved into the earth, a dish that stretched wider than 3 football fields laid end to end. The Arecibo Observatory had spent years listening to the cosmos. But on this day, it would speak. The message lasted just 3 minutes. 169 seconds of focused radio energy beamed outward from our small world into the endless dark. In that brief window, we sent everything we thought mattered. The numbers 1 through 10, the atomic numbers of hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus. The building blocks of our chemistry, a crude sketch of the double helix that writes our bodies into existence. A simple figure of a human being, arms outstretched, as if waving. The population of our planet, the planets orbiting our sun. 3 minutes. That is how long it took to summarize a species. The transmission was aimed at a cluster of stars called M13. This is not a single sun, but a swarm of them. Hundreds of thousands of stars packed into a glittering sphere. The scientists chose it because it was dense with targets. More stars meant more chances that someone might be listening. But M13 is 25,000 light years away. The message will not arrive for another 25,000 years. If anyone receives it, and if they choose to respond, their answer will take another 25,000 years to reach us. The earliest we could ever hear back is the year 52,000 AD. That date is so far in the future that it becomes meaningless. Human civilization as we know it is perhaps 10,000 years old. We are sending a letter that will arrive in a time we cannot imagine, to beings we cannot comprehend, hoping they will write back to descendants we will never meet. The message is a time capsule, but not one buried in earth waiting to be dug up by our grandchildren. This capsule travels outward at the speed of light, unstoppable, unretrievable. Once sent, it can never be called back. It carries our coordinates and our hope into the darkness, and it will keep traveling long after everyone who sent it is gone. The scientists knew this. They understood the mathematics better than anyone. They knew that the Arecibo message was not really about receiving a response. It could not be. The timescales were too vast, the distances too incomprehensible. No one who worked on that project expected to hear an answer in their lifetime. Their children would not hear it. Their grandchildren would not hear it. 1,000 generations could live and die before any reply reached Earth. The message was never really about communication. It was about declaration. It was about standing beneath the stars and refusing to accept that we are alone. It was about saying, in the only language that crosses the void, we are here, we exist, we thought, we hoped, we reached out. Consider what that means. Picture a child calling out in a vast forest at dusk. The trees stretch endlessly in every direction. The child does not know what lives among those shadows, does not know if the creatures hidden there are friendly or hostile, does not know if calling out will bring help or danger. But the child calls anyway, because the silence is unbearable. because being alone in the dark feels worse than any answer that might come. That is what we did. That is what the Arecibo message represents. An act of hope wrapped in vulnerability. A declaration launched into an ocean we cannot fathom. The message is still traveling. Right now, as you listen to this, those 3 minutes of data are hurtling through interstellar space. They have been traveling for 50 years. They have passed through the emptiness between stars, through regions where no human eye has ever looked, through darkness so complete that our sun is just another faint point of light among billions. The bubble of noise that surrounds our planet, all those accidental broadcasts, the television signals and radio waves and military communications, those are ghosts we sent without meaning to. But the Arecibo message was different. That one we sent on purpose. That one carries intention. It says not just that we exist, but that we wanted to be found. In December of 2020, the great dish fell silent forever. The cables that held its massive receiver platform had been weakening for years. One morning, they snapped. 900 tons of steel and science came crashing down into the bowl below, shattering the instrument that had listened to the cosmos for 60 years. The collapse made headlines around the world. People mourned it like the death of an old friend, and in a way, it was. That dish had been humanity's ear to the universe for longer than most people had been alive. It had discovered new pulsars, mapped asteroids, listened for signals from civilizations we hoped existed somewhere among the stars. But here is the thing about the message it sent. The dish is gone now, crumbled into ruin in a Puerto Rican jungle. The scientists who crafted that transmission have grown old. Many of them passed on. The world has changed in ways those researchers could never have predicted. None of that matters. The message keeps traveling. It does not need the dish anymore. It does not need the scientists. It does not need us at all. Those 3 minutes of carefully encoded information will outlast the instrument that sent them, outlast the people who designed them, outlast perhaps the entire species that dreamed them into existence. By the time that signal reaches M13, humanity might be long gone. Our cities might be dust. Our languages might be forgotten. Earth itself might be unrecognizable. And still, the message will arrive, carrying a portrait of beings who no longer exist, reaching out from a world that may no longer spin. The civilization that receives it, if any civilization ever does, will not be meeting us. They will be meeting ghosts. They will be reading the last testament of a species that lived once, that wondered once, that hoped once, and that chose to break the silence even though they knew, even though they understood, that silence might have been safer. That is the weight of what we did. That is the fragile desperation encoded in those 3 minutes. We knew the risks, or at least we suspected them. We knew that calling out into the dark might draw attention we could not control. We knew that the forest might contain hunters as well as friends. We called out anyway. The bubble of noise expands. Our accidental signals drift outward, year by year, carrying sitcoms and declarations of war and love songs sung by people now dead. But among all that noise, there is one signal that was crafted with care, one message that was meant to be understood, one voice that spoke on behalf of an entire world. It travels still. It will travel for thousands of centuries. It carries our coordinates and our chemistry and our crude self-portrait across distances that make human history seem like the blink of an eye. We cannot call it back. We cannot unsend it. We can only watch the stars and wonder what we have done and whether anyone is listening, and whether our hope or our fear will prove more justified in the end. We cannot call it back. We cannot unsend it. And we cannot know what waits at the other end of that journey. That is where we find ourselves now, standing at the edge of understanding, peering into questions that have no answers, only possibilities, only maybes, only the vast and patient silence of a cosmos that keeps its secrets close. Is the great filter behind us or ahead of us? We don't know. We truly don't. Some scientists believe the hardest part of existence has already been conquered. The leap from dead chemistry to living cells, the slow crawl from simplicity to complexity, the improbable chain of events that led to creatures who could look up and wonder. If that's true, then we have already passed through the narrowest gate. We are the survivors, the winners of a lottery so unlikely that our very presence is a kind of miracle. But others believe the filter lies ahead, waiting, patient. Perhaps it takes the form of technologies we haven't invented yet. Perhaps it wears the face of choices we haven't been forced to make. Perhaps every civilization that reaches a certain point simply cannot help but destroy itself, and we are stumbling toward that same inevitable edge without knowing it. We don't really know. That's the honest answer. These questions have been asked for decades, and the best minds in the world have produced theories, not answers. Maybe certainty is too much to ask of a universe this large. Has anyone heard the signals we've already leaked? We cannot say. Our transmissions have been spreading outward, year after year, and by now they have washed over countless star systems. Some of those systems might harbor worlds. Some of those worlds might harbor life. Some of that life might have ears, or something like ears, or instruments that serve the same purpose. They might have heard us already. They might be listening right now. They might have decided, long ago, that we were not worth the effort of a response. Or they might be silent for reasons we cannot imagine, reasons that make perfect sense to them and would terrify us if we understood. We are like sailors on a vast ocean who can see stars to navigate by, but cannot know what lies beneath the surface. The depth is beyond measurement. The creatures below are beyond imagination. We chart our course by points of light in the sky, and we tell ourselves we understand the sea, but we only understand the surface. We only understand the skin of things. What moves in the deep? What watches from below? We sail on, and we wonder, and the water keeps its secrets. That strange visitor that passed through our solar system a few years ago, the one that tumbled end over end on a trajectory that didn't quite match any comet or asteroid we had ever seen. Was it a natural object? A shard of some distant planetary collision, flung across the emptiness by chance? Most scientists believe so. The explanation is ordinary: rock and ice and the random mechanics of gravity. But a few have wondered otherwise. A few have pointed to the unusual shape, the unexpected acceleration, the orbit that seemed almost designed to observe our inner planets before continuing on its way. They have wondered, quietly, whether we might have been visited by something built rather than born. We cannot be certain. We had only a few weeks to study it before it was gone forever, swallowed by the dark between stars. It left no answers behind, only questions. Only the nagging possibility that the universe might be stranger than we want to believe. Some physicists argue that the very fact we're having this conversation is evidence of something remarkable. If the great filter were ahead of us, they say, then statistically we should have already encountered it. The math suggests that in a universe this old, with this many opportunities for life, civilizations should have risen and fallen and reached the stars long before us. If they keep failing at some future hurdle, that hurdle should be common, predictable, almost inevitable. But we're still here. We haven't failed yet. Our continued existence is either a miracle or a temporary reprieve. Either we have already passed through the eye of the needle, or we are simply waiting our turn. The numbers don't tell us which. They only tell us that one of those possibilities must be true. If we reach the stars someday, will we dare to speak? Or will we learn, like we suspect others have learned, that silence is the price of survival? That choice hasn't been made yet. It waits for us in some future we cannot see. Perhaps our descendants will broadcast their presence proudly, confident in their strength. Perhaps they will hide, having learned hard lessons we cannot imagine. Perhaps they will find others like themselves, cautious travelers who understand that the forest demands respect. These questions have no answers, only possibilities, only the slow accumulation of evidence that might, in time, point us towards something like understanding. And perhaps that is as it should be. Perhaps the universe is not meant to be understood completely. Perhaps some doors are meant to remain closed, some depths unplumbed, some silences unbroken. We are small creatures on a small world, and we have been asking these questions for less than a single heartbeat of cosmic time. It would be arrogant to expect answers so soon. The honest truth is that we are at the very beginning of knowing. We have built our instruments and pointed them at the sky. We have listened and wondered and theorized. We have imagined both heaven and hell among the stars, and we have no way to know which vision is closer to reality. That uncertainty can feel like a burden. It can feel like standing in a dark room, reaching out with both hands and touching nothing, never knowing what might be inches from your fingertips. But maybe there is comfort in not knowing. Maybe there is peace in accepting that some questions are simply too large for creatures like us at this moment in our history. With the tools we have built so far, the sailor on the ocean does not need to map every trench and canyon beneath the waves. The sailor only needs to read the stars, feel the wind, and trust the vessel. The depths remain unknown, and that is not a failure. That is simply the nature of the sea. We navigate by what we can see. We steer by the light that reaches us, and we accept, with something like grace, that the darkness holds more than we will ever know. Perhaps that acceptance is its own kind of wisdom. Perhaps the question matters more than the answer. Perhaps the act of wondering, of looking up and asking who else might be out there, is the point. Not the resolution, but the reaching. Not the destination, but the journey across the dark water. These questions reveal something about us. They show that we are creatures who cannot help but ask. We look at the silence between stars and we demand meaning from it. We look at the emptiness and we fill it with stories. Hunters in the dark, filters that destroy, ancient civilizations hiding behind veils of camouflage. We tell ourselves these tales not because we know they are true, but because the alternative, the simple admission that we do not know, feels too heavy to carry alone. But we can carry it. We can hold the uncertainty without being crushed by it. We can look at the unanswered questions and see them not as failures, but as invitations. The universe has given us a puzzle with most of the pieces missing. That is not cruelty. That is simply the scale of the thing we are trying to understand. We are small. The cosmos is vast. And somewhere in the space between those two truths, there is room for wonder without resolution, room for awe without certainty, room for questions that may never be answered, and the strange, quiet comfort of asking them anyway. Perhaps that is the most honest place to rest for a moment, not in answers, but in acceptance, not in resolution, but in peace with the questions themselves. And yet, there is something we have circled around for a long time now, something we have implied but never quite faced directly. We have spoken of hunters in darkness. We have imagined civilizations that strike first and ask no questions. We have described a cosmos where the safest thing to do is remain invisible, remain silent, remain unknown. But we have never asked the most uncomfortable question of all. Who taught us to imagine such things? Where did this fear come from? We did not learn it from the stars. The stars have told us nothing. We did not learn it from alien signals, because we have received none. We did not learn it from ancient visitors or cosmic warnings or messages from beyond. We learned it from ourselves. In the dark forest, every civilization is a potential threat. Every signal is a target. Every first contact is a calculation of risk, and the mathematics always favor destruction. That is the theory. That is the logic we have built. But notice where the logic comes from. Notice whose history it reflects. When we imagine hostile civilizations lurking in the dark, we are not describing them. We are describing us. We are projecting our own nature onto the void and calling it alien. This is not astronomy. This is psychology. This is not a theory about extraterrestrial intelligence. This is a confession about terrestrial behavior. Look at our own past. Look at what happens when two human civilizations meet for the first time. Look at the pattern that repeats across continents and centuries. The seafaring nations of Europe encountered peoples on distant shores, indigenous populations who had lived in their lands for thousands of generations, cultures with their own languages, their own sciences, their own ways of understanding the world. What happened next was not peaceful exchange. It was not mutual learning. It was not cooperation. It was conquest. It was disease and displacement. It was the destruction of knowledge, the erasure of languages, the breaking of peoples. It was civilization meeting civilization and one consuming the other. This happened again and again, across oceans, across centuries, different empires, different victims, but always the same story. When the powerful encounter the vulnerable, the powerful take. We know this. It is written into every chapter of our history. It is the foundation upon which our modern world was built. And when we imagine what might happen if we encountered an alien civilization vastly more advanced than our own, we do not imagine a meeting of equals. We imagine what we would do, what we have done, what we keep doing. In the dark forest, the strong eliminate the weak. That is not a cosmic law. That is a human law. That is what we have taught ourselves across thousands of years of bloody, brutal contact. Looking into the dark forest is like looking into a mirror at midnight. We fear what we see because we recognize it. The face staring back at us is our own. The threat we imagine is the threat we know. The danger we project onto the stars is the danger we carry within ourselves. We are not afraid of aliens. We are afraid of ourselves. We are afraid that intelligence, wherever it arises, might develop the same tendencies we have developed. The same hunger for resources, the same fear of competition, the same willingness to destroy what it does not understand. This is what the dark forest really describes. Not the behavior of unknown civilizations scattered across the galaxy, the behavior of one very specific civilization on one very specific planet. Human curiosity is extraordinary. It drove us to cross oceans in wooden ships. It pushed us to map continents, to catalogue species, to peer into cells and atoms and the hearts of stars. That curiosity built everything we have, every city, every machine, every theory about how the cosmos works. But that same curiosity has consequences. The explorers who crossed the Atlantic were curious. They wanted to know what lay beyond the horizon. They wanted to see new lands, meet new peoples, understand new worlds. And in satisfying that curiosity, they destroyed civilizations that had flourished for millennia. On a galactic scale, the same impulse that makes us search for signals might make us dangerous. The drive to reach out, to connect, to know what else exists. That drive could lead us to announce ourselves to something that does not share our desire for friendship, something that sees our signal the way our ancestors saw distant shores. Not as an invitation, as an opportunity. There is something even stranger to consider, though, something that takes the mirror and tilts it toward a future we can barely imagine. The species most likely to destroy us in a dark forest scenario might not be alien at all. Consider time. Consider how long the universe has existed. Consider how long it might continue to exist. We have been recognizably human for perhaps 300,000 years. We have had writing for 5,000. We have had radio for just over a century. What will we become in 1,000,000 years? What will our descendants look like in 10 million? In 100 million? Evolution does not stop. Change does not pause. The creatures who carry our genes into that distant future may be as different from us as we are from the first fish that crawled onto land. They might not recognize us as ancestors. They might look back at recordings of our species and see something primitive, something limited, something that needs to be managed, or contained, or simply forgotten. The way we look at Neanderthals. We know Neanderthals existed. We know they had culture and tools and possibly language. We know they buried their dead and cared for their sick. They were intelligent. They were aware. They were, in some deep sense, people. And they are gone. We do not know exactly why they vanished. Disease, perhaps, climate change, competition for resources, Or maybe our ancestors simply did what they have always done when meeting another intelligent species. Maybe they won. Our future descendants, separated from us by chasms of evolutionary time, might view us with the same detachment. They might find our broadcasts drifting through space, our ancient signals still traveling outward, and feel no kinship at all. To them, we might be fossils, curiosities, something that existed once, briefly, before the true heirs of Earth emerged. In the dark forest, the hunters might wear our faces. This is not comfortable to contemplate. It is not soothing or reassuring. It strips away the fantasy of alien contact and replaces it with something colder. The recognition that the danger we fear is not distant. It is not separate from us. It is woven into our history, our instincts, our very nature. But recognizing this is not despair. Recognizing this is the first step towards something else. Because if the dark forest is a mirror, then we are not just observers. We are participants. We are not just imagining what might be out there. We are deciding what we will become. The question is not whether hostile civilizations exist among the stars. The question is whether we will be one of them. The question is whether the species that sends its voice into the void will be guided by fear or by something else. We have always had a choice. Every empire that conquered had the option not to. Every civilization that destroyed had the capacity for restraint. The path of violence was never inevitable. It only felt that way afterward. We stand at a threshold, not just between Earth and space, but between what we have been and what we might become. The dark forest does not have to be our destination. It might simply be where we started, a reflection of an adolescent species, still learning, still growing, still figuring out what it means to exist in a universe this vast. The stars are watching, or they are not. We do not know, but we are watching ourselves, and that might be what matters most. Perhaps we have been thinking about survival the wrong way. All through human history, survival meant expansion, taking more territory, building higher walls, growing louder, stronger, more visible. The civilizations we remember are the ones that conquered, the ones that spread, the ones that made themselves impossible to ignore. But the cosmos may reward a different kind of wisdom. Consider what it means to endure, not for a century, not for a millennium, for epochs so long that mountains erode to dust and continents drift into new configurations. The strategies that work for a decade do not always work for 10,000 years, and the strategies that work for 10,000 years may not work for a billion. What if the civilizations that last are not the ones who build empires? What if they are the ones who learn stillness? There is a kind of tree that teaches this, not the redwoods that tower into the sky, drawing attention to themselves across vast distances, not the cedars that spread their branches wide, demanding space. The trees that last longest are often the ones you barely notice. Their growth happens beneath the surface. Their roots spread through the soil in networks so vast and patient that they can sustain themselves through drought, through fire, through the slow turning of seasons beyond counting. They do not reach. They anchor. They do not announce. They persist. To survive in a dark forest may require becoming something like this. Not the brightest signal or the tallest monument, but something quieter. Something that draws its nourishment from patience rather than conquest. Visible to none, sustained by time itself, enduring while others flame out. This feels wrong to us. It runs against every instinct we have cultivated as a species. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to leave marks on the universe that prove we existed. But wanting something does not make it wise. Here is something strange to consider. The dark forest theory, when you first encounter it, seems like a counsel of despair. It paints a universe full of hidden predators, where any sound could summon death. It suggests that the vast silence we observe is evidence of threat, lurking everywhere. But there is another way to read that silence. If staying quiet is survival, and if the silence has persisted for all the time we have been listening, then something remarkable follows. the quiet itself becomes evidence, not evidence of predators, evidence of restraint. Think about what we are actually observing. A universe where, by the logic of the dark forest, every civilization should fear every other civilization, where betrayal could come at any moment, where the safest move is always to strike first. And yet, no strikes, no flashes of extinction-level violence rippling through the galactic neighborhood, no sudden silencing of stars, just this persistent, pervasive quiet stretching across distances we can barely comprehend. What if that quiet is not emptiness? What if it is cooperation? Not cooperation through treaties or handshakes or shared language. Cooperation through the only medium that works across the impossible gulfs between stars. Shared silence. A wordless agreement, maintained by species who have never met and never will meet. To simply let each other exist, the peace we observe might not be absence. It might be choice. A trillion choices, made independently, to refrain, to hold back, to survive by allowing others to survive as well. A treaty written in nothing at all. This is the paradox that keeps me awake sometimes. Our curiosity, our need to reach out. It is the most beautiful thing about us. It is why we crossed oceans, why we built telescopes, why we sent that message from Arecibo. And yet, on a cosmic scale, it might be the thing that dooms us. I do not know how to reconcile that. I am not sure anyone does. We are creatures who evolved to explore, to question, to call out into darkness and hope for a reply. Silence feels like death to us. It feels like loneliness, like failure, like giving up on everything that makes us human. But perhaps silence can mean something else. Perhaps silence can be generosity, the gift of not intruding, the recognition that other forms of existence have as much right to the void as we do. Perhaps the civilizations that have lasted longest are the ones who learned this, who recognized that their hunger to connect, beautiful as it was, had to be weighed against the possibility of harm, who chose restraint not because they feared the consequences of discovery, but because they understood that some things are more important than being known. We talk about technological adolescence, that period when a species gains the power to destroy itself, but has not yet gained the wisdom to refrain. Nuclear weapons, climate destabilization, engineered pathogens. The list grows longer with each decade. Surviving that adolescence may require learning something we have never been good at. How to be still, how to want something, reaching toward it with every fiber of our being, and then choose not to grasp. How to exist without announcing. This is not easy. It may be the hardest thing we ever learn. Everything in our history pushes us toward expansion, toward contact, toward making ourselves known. But the universe is not required to reward what comes naturally to us. The universe is not required to reward anything at all. And yet, somehow, something has survived out there. Many somethings, perhaps, watching the same stars we watch, wondering the same questions we wonder, choosing, again and again, to listen rather than call. The quiet is not proof of their absence. It might be proof of their presence. It might be the sound of civilizations scattered across the vast dark, all keeping the same faith, all honoring the same unspoken agreement, all allowing each other to exist. If this is true, then we are not alone in our silence. We are in company. We have traveled far together, you and I, through the mathematics of loneliness, through the terrible logic of hunters in the dark, through the history of signals we sent without understanding what we were doing, and the silence that answered. The silence is real. This is the truth we have circled around all this time. The sky holds no voices. Our instruments detect no whispers. The darkness between the stars remains unbroken by any hand we can perceive. But perhaps we have been listening wrong. The silence is not emptiness. It never was. It is not the sound of absence. It is the sound of peace. Picture a quilt, not woven from thread, but from restraint. Each stitch is a civilization that learned what we are only beginning to understand. Each square is a choice, made in isolation, to endure rather than expand, to watch rather than speak, to let the universe remain a place where others can exist. This quilt stretches across time and space, woven by hands we will never shake, woven by minds we will never comprehend, woven over spans of time that dwarf everything we have ever known, and we are wrapped in it. The dark forest, which seemed so terrifying at the start of this journey, may be the reason we are still here. The silence that frightened us is the silence that has protected us. All those civilizations who learned the terrible wisdom of the void, who understood that to speak is to risk everything, they did not just save themselves, they saved us too, without knowing we existed, without ever hearing our names. They held back, and in holding back, they allowed this small blue world to spin onward. They allowed your ancestors to walk upright across ancient savannas. They allowed fires to be kindled and stories to be told. They allowed you. We are not alone. We are simply part of a galaxy that has learned something profound, something it took unimaginable suffering to understand. The universe is vast enough for everyone, but only if everyone agrees to be still. Take a slow breath now. Feel the weight of the world beneath you, the gentle pull of gravity holding you close to the only home our kind has ever known. Feel the blankets around you, the pillow beneath your head, the warmth of wherever you are. Close your eyes. The stars are still there, tangled in their invisible webs of gravity, burning their slow fires across distances that have no end. The forest is still dark. The silence still stretches from here to forever, but you are safe. You are on this small world, beneath this particular sky, in this single, unrepeatable moment. And for now, that is enough. The civilizations out there, hidden in the quiet places, they are not your enemies. They are your companions in the only way that matters. They are keeping the same vigil you are keeping, breathing the same borrowed air, looking at the same ancient light. The silence is not a threat. It is a gift. It is the sound of a universe that has found a way to coexist. The sound of wisdom, earned through fear, transformed into something gentler, something that holds space for you, something that will hold space for your children and their children and all the generations yet to come. Let yourself rest now. The questions will still be here tomorrow. The stars will still burn. The mystery will still call to that part of you that wants to know, that needs to understand. But for tonight, there is only this: the quiet, the dark, the peace that has been waiting for us since the first light emerged from the first fire of creation. You are held by the same silence that holds the galaxy, and in that silence, you are home.